Have you ever walked into a room and instantly felt smaller? Not because someone said something cruel, not because of a loud conflict, but because something inside you just dimmed. A pressure, a contraction, a quiet voice that whispered, "Shrink." You didn't choose this. It happened before you could think, before you could respond. It's like a spell that says, don't be too loud. Don't take up space. Don't make others uncomfortable. You walk out of that room feeling exhausted. You think, why do I feel so tired? But what you should be asking is, why did I leave myself? Carl Jung spoke often of the self, the central archetype that seeks integration. But when you're conditioned to prioritize perception over presence, you begin to trade parts of yourself for temporary peace. The problem, peace at the cost of self, is not peace. It's performance. And performance is draining. So if you're always tired, it might not be your schedule. It might be your silence, your over-accommodation, your emotional labor, your fear of being misunderstood. This video is not about changing others. It's about reclaiming yourself, not by force, but by authority. Because the energy you're looking for is not out there. It's in the parts of you you've silenced, and it's time to listen again. Let's name something most people never realize. Energy doesn't just leak when you do too much. It leaks when you betray yourself in micro ways day after day. It leaks every time you say yes when you mean no. Every time you smile when you feel anger. Every time you edit your truth for the comfort of someone who has no intention of seeing the real you. You think you're being kind, flexible, mature. But what you're really doing is outsourcing your authority. Jung warned us, when we trade authenticity for acceptance, we do not find belonging. We find bondage. You're not drained because you're weak. You're drained because you've made everyone else's feelings your responsibility. And that's not empathy. That's enmeshment. It's the inability to tell where you end and another begins. But what if your fatigue isn't about exertion, but suppression? What if it's not that you have nothing left, but that everything you have is locked in a prison of politeness and fear? Jung would say, then your task is not rest, it's remembrance. Remember who you were before you were conditioned. Before they told you, be good, not bold. Be sweet, not strong. Be quiet, not real. Remember her. Remember him. That version of you who didn't flinch at truth, who didn't lower your eyes in the face of conflict, who didn't apologize for taking up space. That version still lives inside you, and they are not fragile. They are fierce. They are sovereign, and they are tired of waiting. But you can't free them through logic. You free them through integration, and integration begins with attention. So today, we pay attention not to who the world wants you to be, but to who you already are. Not the mask, the marrow, not the performance, the power. You do not need to convince anyone. You just need to stop selling yourself. Let's talk about the contract. The silent agreement you made without knowing. The one that said, if I keep everyone comfortable, they'll keep me safe. The one that whispered, if I'm useful, I'll be loved. If I'm small, I won't be abandoned. It's not your fault. You didn't write that contract consciously. It was signed in fear, sealed by experience, reinforced by trauma. And every time you felt the sting of rejection or judgment, you tightened the terms, gave up another piece of yourself, smiled wider, worked harder, softened more, until one day you didn't recognize the face in the mirror, not because you changed, but because you vanished. Jung called this the persona, the mask you wear to survive. But the tragedy is when you mistake the mask for your face, when you spend your energy maintaining the illusion rather than embodying the truth. And that truth is this: your energy was never meant to be currency. You were not born to be consumed. You are not a product. You are a presence. And presence doesn't negotiate. It simply exists, fully, boldly, unapologetically. So here's a radical invitation: audit your life. Where are you for sale? Not literally, but energetically. Where do you shapeshift to avoid discomfort? Where do you bite your tongue to avoid being too much? Where do you give your time, your focus, your heart out of fear instead of choice? That's your leak. That's the hole in your power. And patching it doesn't require war. It requires awareness, a decision, a vow. That from this moment on, you no longer abandon yourself to be understood. You no longer betray yourself to be accepted. You no longer perform for people who wouldn't stay if you stopped. You return to your center, to your spine, to your source. Not by becoming someone else, but by remembering who you were before you forgot. Let's move from awareness to embodiment. Because knowing the leak is not enough. You must choose to seal it every day, in small ways, through nervous system regulation, through boundary repair, through energy awareness. Jung taught that what you resist not only persists, it grows stronger. So if you avoid the discomfort of being real, you feed the illusion of being invisible. But when you dare to feel, when you allow discomfort without collapse, you reclaim the parts of you that have been frozen in fear. You give them breath, voice, ground, and in doing so, you build authority. Not the kind that dominates, but the kind that anchors. Authority is not volume, it's vibration. You don't have to shout, you just have to stay with yourself, especially when it's hard, especially when you're tempted to leave you. So here's a practice: energetic anchoring. Each morning before your phone, before your rolls, take 3 minutes. Place one hand on your heart, one on your belly. Breathe. Ask yourself, where am I giving away energy before the day has even begun? To fear, to comparison, to someone else's timeline. Then speak aloud. My energy is mine. My presence is enough. My worth is not up for debate. This isn't a ritual for comfort. It's a ritual for clarity. Because clarity cuts through chaos. And in a world that profits from your confusion, clarity is rebellion. You will not always be liked, but you will always be whole. And wholeness is worth more than popularity. It is peace. It is power. It is presence. Not performative, but real. And once you taste it, you never want to leak again. Let's be honest about what happens when you stop leaking. People notice. Not always kindly. Some will say you've changed. Some will say you're selfish. Some will say you've lost your spark. But what they really mean is, you've stopped feeding my comfort. And that's not your problem to solve. Because the truth is, every time you give up self-abandonment, someone else's illusion breaks. And most people will do anything to avoid confronting their own illusions. That's not cruelty. That's conditioning. So when resistance shows up, don't internalize it. Recognize it. Jung called this projection. When someone cannot face their own shadow, they cast it onto others. So if your truth triggers someone, it may not be because you're wrong. It may be because you're real. And realness pierces through repression, like lightning through a dark sky. Some will run from it, but others will find you and say, "Thank you. I thought I was the only one." This is the paradox of reclaiming energy. The more you stop leaking for others, the more you magnetize the ones who value your fullness. But you must first withstand the gap, the lonely middle, the space between leaving the old and finding the new. So practice holding your ground. When you say no and your voice shakes, stay. When you feel guilty for choosing rest, breathe. When you feel the urge to explain, justify, shrink, pause. Let the silence hold you. Let discomfort refine you. Because every time you choose alignment over approval, you teach your body that you are safe in your own presence. And that rewires everything. Your nervous system stops scanning for threat. Your mind stops rehearsing for rejection. Your spirit stops leaking for validation. And what's left? Integrity, energy, authority, not borrowed, not forced, yours. And now we return to the beginning. The moment you walked out of the room and felt less. The moment you didn't know why you felt tired, anxious, hollow. The moment you blamed your workload, your diet, your lack of motivation. But deep down, something whispered. You gave something away again. Now you know what it was. Not your strength, not your intelligence, not your time. You gave away your authority. You handed over your center in exchange for peace. But it wasn't real peace. It was silence. And silence that demands your suppression is not peace. It's oppression. Energetic, psychological, invisible. But not anymore. Today, you reclaim. Not with a war, but with a vow. That you will no longer be for sale. That you will no longer shapeshift for safety. That you will no longer leak your light for approval. Because you have remembered something sacred. You were not born to entertain. You were not born to be convenient. You were not born to dim for others to shine. You were born to embody the self, not the performance. You were born to integrate shadow and light, not to edit your truth. You were born to radiate, not to drain. And the moment you stop negotiating with your worth, everything begins to return. Your clarity, your confidence, your presence. People might not understand. Let them go. New ones will find you. The ones who don't need your performance. The ones who love your energy, not your exhaustion. So breathe now. Feel your spine. Feel your truth. And say it with me. My energy is not for sale. My presence is not a product. I am mine. You don't need more power. You just need fewer leaks. Welcome back to yourself. Where do you notice yourself giving away your energy most often? Out of guilt, fear, or habit? And what's one vow you can make today to reclaim it?